Okay, where we last left off, we had installed the Eclipse plugin, we had installed the Mercurial binaries, we had set up source control for an NSF, and then which had generated a local Eclipse project. Then we shared that project, and that actually created a local Mercurial repository. Now the repository, I don't know, there's probably all kinds of real technical descriptions we can give it, but basically, for all intents and purposes, it's a black box clone of all of the code in your NSF. And so when we made the initial repository, it took all of the design elements that are in our NSF, copied them into the repository, and essentially, since nothing is sort of a it's sort of in draft mode, it's sort of not a committed change, it marks the repository itself with a little asterisk critter that says, hey, I haven't been committed, and it shows that the areas and the design elements that have not been committed and those kinds of things. So the idea here is, generically, your process is going to be make some code changes in your NSF. Those changes are going to generate uncommitted changes in the repo. Then you'll commit those changes, give a little comment, and however, whatever your rhythm is, you can do a whole bunch of changes and then commit them. You could commit them one at a time as you make them. You'll kind of develop your own style as you go. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend the next few minutes just going through the basic steps of committing and then seeing the history and then moving back and forth between the history. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to commit all of these uncommitted changes. So I'm going to go down here into team, and I'm going to say I want to commit these changes. Now it requires some kind of commit message, so we're going to just say this is our initial commit after the repository has been created. You could change this however you need to if it's not you. You'll want to select all of these objects for the initial commit, and you'll want to do an OK. Now I want to pause right here for just a second. Warning, warning, danger, Will Robinson. If you have a pretty complex application and it has a lot of design elements, then what you're going to find is Mercurial won't accept you selecting every single one of them on the first commit. And I've determined it's, I don't know, maybe 20 to 50 design elements. So again, if you've got a boatload of design elements, you're going to find that you're going to have to do this multiple times. And so in that case, you just go through, deselect everything, and then I'm just using my keyboard to do arrow down and space bar. It's selecting them. So what you have to do is select them sort of in a group, commit those, and keep doing that until you've committed all the initial commit stuff. But again, that doesn't really come into play until you have just a lot of design elements. So we're gonna perform the initial commit. It's gonna go through and it's gonna commit all those changes, and life's good. Everything over here says, great, I've had all my changes committed. So then, you're gonna do some work. You're gonna go in your XPages and you're gonna do some changes. And so let's just say we're gonna make a change on this test XPage. So here's some text. We're going to get rid of this text, and we're just going to leave it at that. We're going to remove the text. As soon as we make a change to a design element, when we look over here at the repo, it says, hey, I've been modified. In other words, I've got an uncommitted change. And if I look farther down, it says, oh, it's in the XPages folder. And if I look farther down, it's going to be the test XSP. Okay, great. Well, that's the XPage I changed. So I'm going to go ahead and commit that one change. So I'm going to right click here and do a team and do another commit, and I'm going to say okay, removed the text from the test XPage. You're going to want to make these fairly detailed, fairly meaningful. There are other mechanisms that I'm going to show you that will help you sort of navigate your way through your change sets, but don't just put in blah blah blah. Make them somewhat meaningful. So when I click OK, it's going to commit that change, and life went in there. It's all good. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make another change. Let's continue with that. We'll say, all right, this is the newest text, and we'll go in here and we'll say, okay, Rust types, take 2. There we go. And we're gonna make this this button bold, you know, the really dumb way by just using the B. And oh, what the heck, we'll change its color as well to some kind of dark orange. Great. Now we've made a couple more changes. I'm going to escape. I'm going to save it. Just as we were expecting before, it says, hey, there's uncommitted changes. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to commit that change. And I'm going to say, okay, more modifications to the page, including changing the UI. Because, you know, that was a really fancy UI change. So we're going to commit that. Okay, so the generic process is this. Okay, make changes. You can make a whole bunch of changes. You could work on an XPage all day, work on all the XPages, add XPages, delete XPages. All of those things are getting accumulated in the sort of the buffer, the uncommitted set of changes. And when you feel comfortable, you're going to commit those changes. They're going to go into your local repository, and then now your repository is going to have that change. Now, some really important information is indicated in the repo sort of label here. The first thing is it tells you where it's associated with, if it's associated with anything at all. The second thing is it shows there's a little counter right here. The first number up until the colon is an incremental counter. So when we first did our first commit, we were at 0 revision 0. Then we did revision 1, and we just did revision 2. So that first number is going to be always the number of the revision. After the colon, but before the @ sign, is a unique number, and basically it's just an ID number. And then finally, there's after the @ sign, there's going to be an indicator here that we'll play around when we get to branching. But the big thing here that I want to talk about is this history and the revisions. So one of the coolest things about using a repository or source control is your ability to go back and forth in time. So we've made a couple changes to a single XPage. We've committed those changes. Well, the history of all of those changes are recorded in the repo. And if I right click on the repo itself and go to team and say show history, I'm going to get this nifty little history critter. By the way, a lot of times it defaults up here. I had to move mine down. But what you can see is you can exactly see that change set. And look here, 0, 1, 2, and then all those things get a unique looking number. The other thing to note is there's always a tip. So if you have 58 revisions, okay, then revision number 57, because it starts at 0, whatever the latest revision is, that will automatically be recognized as the tip. That's the top, latest, most revision. And so that's indicated right here in the label as well. And then we're using the default branch, which we'll get into. But so there is this history of what? At least an initial commit, 1 change, 2 changes. Well, cool. What can you do with those? Let's just say you make a change and you change that button to orange and bold, and you showed it to your boss, and your boss was like, yeah, no, that's a problem. So you say, well, all right, boss, I can change that back. So with the repo, you can go in here, right click on team, and do a switch to. The switch to area has a variety of mechanisms that allow you to switch back to specific change sets. So we're going to look in the revisions tab, and here's all of our revisions. I'm going to switch to revision 1. When I click OK, Designer is automatically going to start dumping all of the code that was in that change set at that time into my NSF. In other words, it's going to remove everything or replace everything that was changed in revision 2. So I'm going to say OK. Down here in the lower right, it's doing its little thing. Great. I can see right here I'm on revision 1. I can also see that I'm no longer on the tip because it doesn't say tip. That tells me that there's revisions after this. If I look inside of the actual test, then if you remember, the first thing we did was we removed the text. So it's gone now. And the label's not orange and bold and all that kind of stuff. So let's go back and let's move back up in the history. So we'll switch to a different revision. Let's go ahead and go to revision 2. It's going to update the NSF. Yeehaw! Then we're going to look at the test X page again, and sure enough, those changes are back. So in effect, what is going on is the repo itself is taking snapshots, differential snapshots essentially, of all of your code in your application. And what that gives you is the ability to make changes, commit them, and then if you don't like what you did, you can go backwards in time, or you can even go back in time. Like maybe you deleted an X page and you need to get it back. You can go back a couple steps in your revisions, and you can replace the design or update your NSF, and then go back and get that X page, copy it to the clipboard, or however you need to do it. But very, very, very handy. Okay, the next thing we'll do is we'll talk about how to push your repository to a remote repository.